Welcome to Conifer Cliffs, a place where the roaring 1920s collide with the untamed West, where mobsters chase fortune, cowboys fight for honor, and love survives against impossible odds. Tonight, as the fire crackles and snow falls outside, we begin our journey into secrets, danger, and a mystery that could change everything. This is Conifer Cliffs, Chapter 1. Dax McCatron slept deeply in his bedroll on the ground between a root cellar and an abandoned farmhouse just west of Chicago. It was midsummer 1922, right in the heart of Prohibition. The mobs in Chicago ruled everything. Dax had stepped off a ship at Ellis Island 2 months before and walked westward, stopping only to work odd jobs and make enough to eat and go on. He'd left poverty in Ireland and set out to start a new life in America. Dax walked until dark on the evening of July 11th, one of the year's longest days. He slept late in the warm sunshine when a gunshot woke him, followed by another and another. Then, the air became full of lead. None of the bullets were headed his way, but he crawled quickly to safety, dragging his bedroll into the underground cellar. There seemed to be no end to the gunshots. Hunkering down in the cellar, he was afraid to look out to see what was going on. Dax waited. He did not know who owned the place where he slept. It was just where Dark and Tired met last night. He continued to hear what sounded like a war out on the highway that fronted the house. The gunfire slowed as sirens from the direction of Chicago got louder and louder. But when the sirens arrived, gunfire erupted heavily again. More sirens came, and more gunfire pierced the air. He had no idea what was going on. He only knew he wanted to stay in this cellar, where he hoped to remain safe. Dax knew the reputation of Chicago gangsters. He also knew he had no desire to meet any, but he admitted to himself that he had often thought of illegal ways to become wealthy. The shooting slowed until it sounded like only 2 guns were left. A blast from a machine gun followed one lone shot, then another lone shot, and the machine gun did not answer. Dax wondered if the war was over. He waited through 10 minutes of absolute silence and then reluctantly raised the cellar door and slithered out on his belly. He crawled around the side of the house and peered in the direction of the turmoil. Since he was not part of either side in this fight, anyone who saw him would likely fire at him. A new, black Lincoln parked near a huge weeping willow tree in the front yard caught his eye. A dead body was draped over the steering wheel, and 5 dead bodies were sprawled across the front yard. The Lincoln was riddled with bullet holes, and 5 machine guns lay scattered amongst the bodies. From his vantage point, Dax could not see who shot these bodies. He did not want to crawl further and possibly expose himself to more danger. His heart beat 1,000,000 times a minute. Staying close to the foundation of the house, he crawled around to an opposite corner where he could see 7 police cars scattered haphazardly on the road and in the adjacent field. Dax saw no evidence of life. Did he dare look closer? Did he dare expose himself in any way? If he tried to help anyone who might be alive, would they think he was a gangster? He wanted to help, but felt very reluctant. Would more police be coming? Would it be safe to talk to them? Should he stay in hiding? Should he run away and forget he ever saw this encounter? It was quiet. The only sound came from the fast thumping of his heart. Dax crawled behind a hedge that had long ago died when the inhabitants of this farmhouse failed to maintain the grounds. The hedge behind the house delineated the boundaries of what had been a well-kept yard and garden. He could not see through the dense hedge and guessed that no one would be able to see him. He crawled along the garden side of the hedge, which paralleled a north/south road intersecting the east/west highway in front of the house. Dax continued crawling down the hedge towards the intersection and saw he was now behind the police cars strewn about with their doors open and lights still flashing. He could crawl no closer without exposing himself to what danger might remain. Some time had passed since Dax heard anything. Should he risk exposure? What could possibly be in it for him if he did? Could he help someone? He remained close to the ground and craned his neck around the roots of the hedge, trying to decide what to do. Dax waited. Hearing no sounds, he cautiously stood up behind the hedge and walked slowly and carefully to the police cars. Passing the scattered bodies, it was obvious there was not enough left of any of them to sustain life. He carefully walked on, crouching close to the cars in case someone on the other side was still alive and saw him. He crept on, looking and listening. Then, he heard a slight moan and approached the source of the sound. A policeman slumped against the running board of a Chevrolet Roadster, squirted blood like a pressurized sieve. Dax crouched down low and made his way to the wounded man. "What can I do to help you, sir?" Dax asked in his Irish brogue. "Are they still alive?" "Who?" "The gangsters." "I don't know," Dax said. "Any policeman left?" "Not that I have found yet. I think I killed the last one," the policeman whispered, his voice fading. "Yes, I think you did," Dax answered. "What did these guys do?" "What didn't they do?" He coughed, and his voice faded. "Are more police coming?" Dax asked. "No, I think they're all here. Let me help you into the car, and I'll take you to the nearest hospital if you can tell me where it is," Dax offered earnestly. He wheezed. And trying to take a breath, he gasped, and he was gone. Dax snuck in and out and between the police cars and counted 12 bodies. He yelled, "Is anyone still alive over there? I want to help you if there is." There was no response. He ran with his head below the hedge to the corner of the house where he first observed the Lincoln and 6 bodies. Nothing had changed since he had looked at this scene before. He yelled again, "I want to help you. Don't shoot." He walked cautiously to the Lincoln, observing 5 bodies on the ground and 1 draped over the steering wheel. There were 6 dead gangsters and 12 dead cops. Those machine guns sure throw a lot of lead, he thought, noticing all the shot-up cop cars, but the cops had only shot up 1 Lincoln. Dax observed his surroundings, wondering what to do. He opened the Lincoln's passenger side front door. Another machine gun lay where the driver had dropped it when he fell over the steering wheel. In the back seat, a stack of bags and a thick leather briefcase caught his eye. He opened the back door and unzipped the duffel bag stuffed with bills of all denominations. He laid the heavy, leather briefcase down on the back seat and undid the buckles. It was full of 1-inch thick, neatly packed bundles of $100 bills. He took out one of the bundles and quickly flipped through it. It appeared to be $10,000. Dax guessed there must be close to $1 million that no one else knew the whereabouts of. He knew it did not belong to him, but Dax imagined how it could change his life. "No one on this continent knows or has seen me long enough to remember me. Is this an opportunity or a curse? I'm only stealing what gangsters stole," he whispered to himself. "I need to hide it and come back to get it later." Dax grabbed the briefcase in his right hand and 2 of the duffel bags in his left and ran into the barn situated past the cellar where he had taken refuge. He stashed the bags and ran back after the others. With all the bags in the barn, he counted out $3,000 in small bills from one of the duffels and filled his 2 front pants pockets. Next, Dax grabbed a shovel next to a pitchfork in the corner of the barn and proceeded to dig a hole in the dirt floor next to a small stack of loose hay, big enough to stash all the bags side by side and have at least 2 feet of dirt covering them. Once Dax shoveled the last dirt on top, he pitched the loose hay to hide the disturbed ground. Sweating and out of breath, Dax cracked open the barn door. Looking north, he saw a highway and flat farmland planted with random windbreaks of oak, elm, and maple. He hurried to the cellar, rolled his bedroll, tied it to his backpack, and left the scene. Dax walked northward up a far less traveled road than the east/west highway, where the shootout occurred. The early afternoon sun beat down. He walked briskly for an hour, passing only a few farms. In the short term, his destination changed. He would still be heading west, but now, he thought, maybe in a new Chevrolet at 40 miles an hour. First, he needed to find a store to buy some new clothes. New boots would feel good on my sore feet too, he thought. Dax heard a car coming from behind. Now, at least 5 miles away, he felt safe enough to hitchhike. No one would imagine he came from the crime scene, he reasoned. He turned and faced the Model T truck, chugging toward him on the hard, dusty road. He stuck out his thumb, and the truck stopped. "Where you headed?" A young blonde-haired fellow in bib overalls asked, sticking his head out the window. "Just to the next town. Hop on the back." "Sorry. The cab is full of stuff." "Thanks." Dax climbed onto the front corner of the flatbed next to the driver's window, his back leaning against wooden boxes filled with produce. Soon, Dax read a sign that said, Skokie, Illinois, population 763. The tiny town, packed with cars and people on the streets, bustled with activity. "Looks like something big is going on here." Dax hollered to his driver. "Some big, highfalutin golf tournament, I heard. U.S. Open, I think they said. Thanks for the ride. I'm sure obliged." Dax hefted his pack and disappeared into the crowd. Even though it was only 5 in the afternoon, the long, taxing day completely exhausted Dax. He wanted to buy new clothes, check into a hotel, take a long-needed bath, and sleep in a soft bed. Dodging neatly dressed people on the boardwalk, he found Phillips Dry Goods, which had already closed for the day. Dax did not feel comfortable going to restaurants or hotels in his present attire. One more night being poor, he thought to himself. Then, if I'm careful, I will be a rich man for the rest of my life. Dax walked through the crowd to the outskirts of town and slept under a bridge. The morning sun burned through Dax's eyelids. He woke with anxious enthusiasm. This day would change his life from poverty to riches. He relaxed on his tattered bedroll until he thought it was late enough for the dry goods store to be open. Leaving his bed under the bridge for another poor soul, he walked back into town with his few belongings stuffed in his backpack. Jess Phillips lifted. To be continued in Chapter 1, Part 2 of Conifer Cliffs.